Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to have our continuation with a discussion in purposive communication, specifically communication for various purposes. So, last time we have paused our discussion for um, public speaking. Okay, so for today, we're going to discuss interview and an overview for the communication in the workplace. Okay, so let's have an insight no when it comes to interviews. So I think you are familiar with what interviews look like. Okay, so an interview is a two-party interaction. Okay, so interviews are required to have two people, sometimes multiple, no, although rarely. So two people in it where one, the interviewer asks specific purpose, serious purpose questions towards the interviewee, which is the one who answers the question. Okay, so usually in interviews, there is an unbalanced in terms of conversations or in terms of speaking. There's an imbalance between the interviewer and the interviewee because um, sometimes um, sometimes the speaker or the interviewer would say something, but most of the time it is the interviewee or the one that's being interviewed that speaks or talks a lot. Okay, she because they are the ones who answer questions. Okay, so those answers in the following questions might be relevant, let's say, towards academics or um, work. No, usually we use interviews in jobs or careers, but interviews can vary. No, it depends on the purpose or the assigned purpose. Sometimes it can also be used in gathering information. Okay, it can also be used for researches. It can also be used in um, uh, academic um, concerns. Okay, so usually interviews um, um, require the transfer of information in both directions, but mostly, like what I have mentioned kanina, it is the interviewee. Yeah, it is the interviewee who speaks the most. So interviews can happen in a wide variety of contexts. So, like what I mentioned, it can be from employment. So it can be from marketing and academics. So when you say employment, these concerns are for work. Okay, so this concerns career related or work related things. Okay, so usually the standard forms of employment interviews know where an HR interviews a candidate on why did he or she applied for the job, what are his or her qualifications, no, what is the course that he took or he or she took, and why did they decided to apply for the role. Okay, so sometimes employers ask um, questions or impose tasks or challenges and asks you to resolve the situation. Okay, so sometimes a series of interviews can be arranged. No, sometimes you have first and second interviews. No, it depends on the screening process of the company. Sometimes they only require one interviews. Sometimes they require two or more. Okay. So next is marketing and academic purposes, which um, most brands use. No, for example, they're surveying on um, how many people likes their product, or um, let's say for research purposes, no, especially on qualitative researches, no, academic interviews, interviews for academic purposes is used for those specific types of um, research methodologies. Okay. So, in marketing research and academic research, interviews are used in a wide variety of ways as a method to do extensive personality tests. Okay. So, they usually ask questions about the product, or they ask questions about the experience of the people. Okay, that was the usual things that they ask. So those things are for product development, no, possibly if it's for marketing, or um for references, let's say in researches. So ganon. Psychologists use a variety of interviewing methods and techniques to try to understand and help their patients. So, in a psychiatric interview, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, or a therapist will often ask questions to students, no, or to people, no. Usually kasi ano eh, sa guidance counselor, no, to ask about their mental state, no, what we call sometimes psychological assessment or psychiatric assessment. Okay, sometimes it's also possible for police to interview, especially detectives, to ask questions towards involved people in the situation. So that can also be a form of what do you call this? An interview that is for a psychology purpose. Excuse me. What else? Yeah, they use that methodology, or they use that process. Okay, so criminologists use that whenever they interrogate their suspects, not to see if um they are guilty or not, or um they are involved in the specific crime or issue that was committed. No, sometimes they, because usually detectives have their own strategies whenever they're asking. So that's one thing. Okay, so victims try to ascertain what can be recalled, especially from a crime scene. If you're going to watch crime documentaries in YouTube, no, you often see um, the techniques that psychologists, or I mean interviewers or detectives, ask towards suspects. No, it's really interesting how they um, ask questions, no, that kind of say if the perpetrator is guilty or not. Now, they have different strategies, but it's for mainly trying to understand what happened. No? They're really good at discerning if the witness is telling the truth or not. Okay. Next, we have journalism and other media. So in an interview, 'di ba, I think you're familiar with the news. Most people that they interview, that's for journalism or media. Okay, so reporters can interview government officials in public post, or people on a um people on a what do you call this, important people, basically. Even celebrities sometimes are being interviewed. So that's for journalism. So in talk shows as well, no, and other forms of media, di ba, yung mga updated showbiz happening. Lars Santiago sometimes interviews celebrities, no, Boya Bunda. Okay, so the hosts, no, in noontime shows, let's say, or other programs, no, that are targeted for specific people. Okay, so sometimes, for the purpose of entertainment, these questions are being asked. No, for journalism, for the sake of the truth, or the perspective, no, or the vantage point of various people. Okay, especially prominent figures in our countries. Okay, so each interview have different characteristics. So we have goal driven. Goal driven, in this situation, interviews are generally more goal driven, of course. What when we say goal driven, we have a specific we have a specific target, or a specific goal. Now, whenever we're trying to interview someone, so it's either we're asking questions, no, that would lead us to an answer, or we're trying to look for signs and symbols, or we're trying to gain facts. Okay, so that is one of the characteristics for interviews. So information, we're trying to gather information mainly. Okay, so there's a problem that we need to resolve. No, we need to persuade someone. We need assistance. Okay, or we're an employer assessing a candidate. So that's goal driven. No, I mean, whenever you do interviews or whenever someone does an interview towards you, no, there's always a goal at the end of the interview. No, there's always a target. So yeah, that is one of the characteristics. Next, we have question and answer, of course. No, I think it's not going to be an interview without questions and answers. So um sometimes more than one, like what I've mentioned, no. But usually it's a one-on-one person involved or people involved, no. So usually communication, it includes occasional questions, no, but do not confuse conversations with interviews, because um conversations, it doesn't really have a goal, eh, no, but interviews are different. Okay, so there's usually a target. No, conversations, not really, it can be you just communicating with someone. No, you have other concerns, or you're not really serious, but in interviews there's a target that you need to reach. Okay, so usually in everyday communication, um it's not usual, no, to do a interview type or a similar version of interviewing, no, especially ambush interviews, no, to your relatives or to your friends, no, that would be really uncomfortable. So usually interviews are performed in a constrained environment. Later, going to discuss more about that. So next, interviews are structured, so it's not impromptu and it's not biglaan. Okay, so interviews are more what do you call this? Um, More coherent than usual conversations or usual question and answers. No, or question and answer type of questions. I Yeah, line of questions. So there is an interaction between two people, but the questions that you ask, no, it involves planning and preparation. Okay, you do not just ask away, no, because you might ask something that is inappropriate, no, or can be intrusive, no. Especially sa mga artista, 'di ba? If you're watching celebrity interviews, no, sometimes the people in the press, they ask intrusive questions, especially in um or entertainment, the entertainment side of what do you call this? Entertainment side especially. But on one-on-one interviews, no, especially if um usually it involves a TV show or something that's academic, no, the questions are already prepared, no. uh, the lineup is already prepared, so it involves planning and preparation. Okay, so next we have controlled. So interviews are generally inside a controlled environment, so the interviewer is the one who is um pushing, no, towards the goal, kasi siya yung more na may power on the situation, no. So the interviewer's goal is to assess, or to depends on the goal, no. Sometimes they ask questions to find if the one who's applying is a good candidate. Sometimes they ask questions because they want to know more about you. Then they ask you um to know your qualifications. So it depends. Okay. Asking about your experiences, no? So once again, it depends on the goal, but usually it's um it's controlled, no? More ano siya, more constrained, unlike conversations that everyone can rebut or everyone can join in. No, it's not like that. Next, we have unbalance. So again, 'di ba, the interviewer and interviewee does not have the equal percentage in terms of speaking. It's possible for the interviewer to speak 30% and the interviewee to speak for 70%. But that doesn't mean that the interviewer is not doing anything. No, it's possible that the questions that they ask is no for them to assess someone nor to know something. No, those type of questions. Based on those questions and based on the answers that was going to be given or that are going to be given by the interviewee, no, would the interviewer do their next goal or their next task. So usually the interview is the one who is in charge. I mean the interviewer, sorry. The interviewer is in charge in interviews, no. Yung nagtatanong yung usually nagdadala ng interview. So, what are the common interview questions, no, especially in job interviews? Because you might be interested someday in applying, let's say, for a call center or a work, no, or if you're a working student right now and you're interested in applying for jobs. So, these are the usual interview questions that they ask you. So, they have different goals whenever they ask you these questions, no. Um, but the target here is so that they can hear you speak, they can hear you communicate, they could learn more about you, they could learn more things, know how you handle stress, how you handle pressure, how you solve how do you apply your problem solving skills, no, in certain issues. It depends. Okay, but here are the common interview questions that they have. So usually when they ask you to tell you about yourself, no, or why do you want this job, they wanted to hear from you. How did you apply, no, where did you learn about it, why should we hire you, I mean, what are the good qualities that you have, or what can you offer towards the company? Now, what are your strengths and weaknesses? A lot of people are they always have a mistake or do a mistake when they are answering these. No, when an interview asks you about your strengths and weaknesses, they wanted to know what are the things that you need to improve about yourself. No, so sometimes people are too honest about their weaknesses. They would say, one of my weaknesses is that I am lazy, di ba? That would be a red flag towards the HR because they would not apply you, di ba? Why would they apply you when you already stated in the interview that you're going to be lazy or you're lazy, di ba? So one tip that I can advise in this question, no, try to try to look for a way to highlight that one weakness of yours and turn it into something that is positive. Okay. So, how do you turn a weakness into positive? Okay. So, for example, you can say that um, you're having an issue in terms of time management, but you are currently working on it, or the current situation that you're in has already improved. No, you can say that. You can state that. So that would be a safe answer in terms of strengths and weaknesses. No, do not state a strength when they ask you about your weakness because you would come up as humble bragging or show off, and a lot of interviewers do not like that. So how did you learn about the job, what do you do outside of work? No, usually they ask this because they want to know what is your personal life is, or they want to know something that is not in your resume, no, the things that you cannot state in your resume. So, how do you deal with pressure for them to find out if you are qualified for the job? What can we expect from you? Know what are the things that you can offer for the company? Okay. Usually, sometimes interviewers let you ask questions for them. So you can say that what is the usual role? No, what is the common tasks that you do in your line of work, so you can ask those things. So those are the 15 common job interview questions. I'll also try to link a video, or you can search on YouTube, no, how to answer common questions, no, in terms of interviews. So there's a lot of them actually in YouTube. So next we have an overview, or let's have an overview in the communication in the workplace. So we have a quote here: communication in the workplace is critical to establishing and maintaining quality working relationship and organization. So before we go towards the next slide, try to think of that quote. Now, what does it mean? Now, why is it important for us to establish and maintain relationships in work? Well, not relationships sa love, ha? But I mean relationships like casual relationships with your coworkers, okay? Why how you're gonna um because you're working with these people, so how are you going to communicate with them? No, how are you going to um conduct business, no, towards your everyday routine, right? And if you're not vibing with your um coworkers, diba, what would happen? It would be awkward or weird in the office. Okay. So yeah, that's why communication is important in workplaces as well. You might be wondering ng mga bata pa kayo. May sabihin niyo, bakit pinag-aaralan natin yung workplace communication nag-aaral pa lang tayo? No, we can also apply several principles of workplace communication inside the classroom naman. Okay? So why is it important for um why is workplace communication important? So number one, it creates job satisfaction, of course. Now if you are somehow civil civil with your coworkers, so it would be easier for you to do your job. Okay, for example, you need to do a task, no, and you know that a person in one department can help you, diba? You can easily ask them or you can easily approach them, diba? If the people inside the company are not approachable, you might have a hard time conducting your tasks or doing your tasks. Or a lot of people possibly can resign from work because they are not happy with the environment that they are in. Okay? So that can be a challenge. So even though sometimes the job is good, no, the salary is good, a lot of people tend to leave because of annoying coworkers or coworkers who are have a different mindset than you. That can be a challenge sometimes. Okay, so it can demotivate an employer. I mean an employee. So that can be really really challenging. Okay, so the more that you communicate with your peers in the workplace, so the more that you can do your job faster. Next, we're going to have lesser conflicts, diba? If people in the offices can communicate properly, a lot of issues would be resolved. No? A lot of what do you call this, misunderstandings can be resolved instantly. Okay, kindly explanatory. It also increases productivity. No, I mean, um one of the targets of effective communication, no, is or I mean effective communication is essential in the success or the failure of the company. So the more that people from different departments or different workers communicate with one another, or if the communication line is easier, no, it would increase productivity because it would be easy for them to talk to each other regarding business. Okay, so it leads to a better work performance, no, and of course that would increase the productivity of the workplace. Next, we have nurtures relationship, no? So open communication, whether between employees and bosses or admins, no, leads to a better personal and professional relationship between the following. Okay? So, of course, 'di ba, kapag ang isang empleyado ay masaya sa kanyang trabaho or sa paningin niya siya ay pinapahalagahan sa isang company, 'di ba? The person would be likely more inclined to work the more that they are going to push, no, and the more that they are going to be happy doing their jobs, no, or syempre they would impress their admins or their bosses more. Okay, so that can nurture the relationship na between administrator and workers. So that can create a very friendly environment. Okay, that is very productive in terms of work. Next, it also maximize your resources. So if there's any issues, no, if um there's any conflicts, no, due to miscommunication, issues can be easily resolved. Okay, so issues can be easily solve because you can ask help, no, from your um from other people in the company. Okay, so that leads to um less wastage in terms of resources because you have a lot of resources, a lot of people that are willing to help you, no, and kumbaga ano, it can you can utilize your resources more, no, if a good workplace communication is nurtured inside the company. So next we have environmental barriers in terms of um workplace communication. So we have time, managerial philosophy, power or status, and technology. So for next meeting, we're going to discuss those as well as how to overcome those barriers. And then usually the written communications that we conduct in businesses. Okay. So for now, you have an activity posted in your Google Classroom. You need to um do a task. So the task um is related to and interviews and public speaking. Okay? So those two. Kindly look at your Google Classroom. So thank you so much for listening to this video. So that would be the end. No. So for any questions you can message me on Facebook or you can message me in our group chat. So that would be it for now. Okay. So we'll continue our discussion next meeting. Please do not forget to do the task after this. No, the deadline would be on Thursday. So siguro I'll just show it na rin para you're familiar. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to pick 4 questions, no? So um based on the pool here, the question pool, you're going to choose 4 questions and then record yourself in the video and answer your chosen questions. Okay, so imagine that this is an interview, no, that we are trying to talk. So I'm going to assess your um interview slash speaking skills. Okay, so each question should be at least or should be at the 1 to 2 minute mark. Okay, so each question dapat more or less than 2 minutes, no, or less than 2 minutes, no, pero not more than 1 minute. Ay, ano ba? Not less than 1 minute, but not more than 2 minutes. Okay, so choose four of these questions. So the maximum minutes for the video is 8 minutes because you're only asking 2 minute mark, no. So yeah, that would be your task. So the deadline would be on Thursday. So please do not forget. Okay. So that would be it for our discussion. So we'll continue with it next meeting. Okay. So I'll see you soon. Thank you for listening with this audio recording.